Hello, BookTube, and welcome back to Book Trek 2021. This is a 5-month reading mission I'm embarked on with a bunch of other booktubers, where we're reading Star Trek fiction. All the many, many, many novels of Star Trek fiction. We're not reading them all, but we're doing our best, I am anyway, to read a wide variety of these things, starting in August with the original series. Any novel starring the original series cast. Then we moved on to Next Generation. That was a voyage of discovery for me because I hadn't really given The Next Generation its due, and I've been loving that. I'm still kind of, sort of continuing with that, watching The Next Generation, and noticing all sorts of subtlety that I missed the first time through. Then we moved on to Deep Space Nine, which is a Star Trek series that I really liked, and the books, the books I did not like. Oh my god, I read a lot of Deep Space Nine fiction in that month, and wish I could take it all back. Then we're moving on. For this month, we're going on to Star Trek Voyager, which is a show that, aside from the original show, I like the most. And maybe in some ways more. I just think it's fantastic. Just absolutely fantastic. It's the story of the USS Voyager, a Federation starship, that is launched and then flung by unguessable alien technology to the other side of the galaxy, 80,000 light years away. So even if they fly in a straight line straight back to Federation space at maximum warp, it'll take 70 or 80 years to get there. The death sentence for a lot of people on board. And Catherine Janeway, the captain of Voyager, is suddenly in a different quadrant of the galaxy, the Delta Quadrant, far from Federation support, far from the help of her colleagues or her fellow captains, the advice or orders of her admirals, and on her own, completely on her own, with her crew, where everything they encounter is brand new and could be an enemy. And their mission is twofold. They are still Starfleet officers, so they are still going to explore strange new worlds and new civilizations, but they also want to get home. So another strong impulse is to find technology that can help shorten the journey. It's a terrific premise for a Star Trek show, and I'm very happy that it was done so well. There are many, many highlights throughout the 7 seasons of Voyager. And it's great to have Kate Mulgrew was the actress who played Catherine Janeway. It's great to have her back in Star Trek. She plays a hologram of Catherine Janeway in Star Trek Prodigy. Is that what it is? Star Trek Prodigy? It's an animated, a kids Star Trek show that I'm abashed to think that I don't remember the actual name. It's Star Trek Prodigy, I think. But I watched the first few episodes of Star Trek. I have them on an e-screener. I watched the first few episodes, and there's a lot to think about there. I know it's for kids. It's got a frenetic, very much Disney Pixar pace to it. And the character designs are all Disney Pixar as well. But some of the characters are explicit callbacks to actual Star Trek, to settled Star Trek. Some of them are. Most of them aren't. But there's a Tellarite crewman on this starship, this beautifully designed starship. Oh my god. Like a combination of the Enterprise in Star Trek Enterprise and Voyager. Just a beautiful starship design. There's a Tellarite in that crew, and there's also a Medusan. Energy beings. They're incorporeal beings that have to live in containers, in box-like containers, because if normal human beings, if normal beings with normal optic nerves see them, they go insane with the sight. It drives them nuts. A Medusan featured prominently in a great episode of the classic Star Trek, and there's one on this crew in a self-containment unit that this time has metal legs and metal arms so that they can actually move around and do things. I believe I got all the way through the first 3 episodes. I was totally charmed. And I loved having, even in little snippets, I loved having Catherine Janeway back, even a little, even as a hologram. But when I was watching this show, I mentioned the other day, the show is split into 2 basic halves. There's before the character 7 of 9, and then there's after the character 7 of 9. 7 of 9 is a human being who was co-opted by the Borg, and the Borg live in the Delta Quadrant where the Voyager suddenly is. So when Voyager encounters this Borg named 7 of 9, they sever her from the collective and slowly begin to rehabilitate her as a human being. It's a terrific performance by Jerry Ryan. And it really does add something to the show. And I've been reading books on both sides of that divide for New Worlds November, and I intend to continue for the next 3 weeks. And I've been finding good stuff on both sides. I know that a lot of Voyager fans don't like Voyager before 7 of 9. They think it's kind of cookie cutter. I don't agree. I love the fact that these characters have such long and complicated histories with each other. I just love it. Janeway's first officer, Chakotay, has a long history with her chief engineer, B'Elanna Torres. Does Chakotay know? Did he know Tom Paris when they were both in Starfleet before they both left for one reason or another? Did Tuvok know either one of them in Starfleet? Tuvok is Janeway's 100-year-old Vulcan security officer, and also her oldest friend and her best friend, and so on and so forth. There are private relationships all over the place, except for the ship's doctor, who is a hologram. It has no relationships with anybody. And I remember when I was watching those earliest episodes, one of the first things that came to my mind, in terms of just the practicality of the show's concept, was sorry, the bean is once again disrupting. She's not on her perch. Instead, she's wedged against me. I wondered in those early episodes, well, okay, that's great. It's great as a premise, but surely no starship launches on its maiden voyage as a self-contained unit. Surely that doesn't happen, right? A warship that's launched from harbor, well, okay, its linen closets will be full, its larder will be full, its armory will be full, but every weapon that it expends is one less weapon it has. It doesn't have the machine shop on board to make new weapons. That's a whole factory on its own with multiple moving parts. So if you have, a destroyer that has 100 torpedoes, if they fire 10 torpedoes, they're going to have 90 torpedoes until they can get back to dock and be refitted. Same thing I would think would be true with food stores, right? You only have so much food. You can ration it, you can make do, but you can't get new material if you're at sea. Or your keel, for instance. If you need a new keel, you certainly can't do that on your own. You have to go somewhere and get that work done. And I was thinking when we learned that Voyager is 80,000 light years from Earth, well, okay, what do they do? What do they do if they need to fire phaser banks or fire off photon torpedoes? Phaser banks aren't infinite, and photon torpedoes can't surely be manufactured on board Voyager. You have replicators in Star Trek technology, which rearrange molecules. Technically, I guess you could use replicated engine waste and sort of almost close that loop, but you wouldn't close it completely. You'd be losing something every time. So I started wondering geeky Star Trek questions like that. I started thinking, well, would Voyager have to take things better armed than most of the species they're encountering? Or would they have to find uninhabited planets and have protracted prospecting missions where they're not doing anything other than looking for raw material? And even the raw material wouldn't help that much, would it? Would they contract with other aliens? How could you contract with a lesser alien species, a lesser technology? How could you contract with them to use their facilities to make photon torpedoes without giving them the knowledge of photon torpedoes? Just that part of it struck me as, how long could this starship possibly go on its own before that became a crucial issue? It wouldn't just be food that you'd be looking for. It'd be a whole bunch of other things that you're not able to make on board your own starship. Now, little did I know when I was thinking that years later, the Voyager showrunners would give us an episode like that, a great episode called Equinox, where Voyager encounters another stranded starship, Equinox, and they haven't been lucky. They haven't been lucky the way we then realized Voyager has been lucky. Their replicators haven't been able to keep up. They haven't been able to fix all of their damage. They have had to resort to preying on other races and stealing things just in order to stay alive. And their captain is pretty bitter towards Janeway. It's easy enough for you to make these moral pronouncements when you're nice and comfortable. If you weren't, maybe you would have made the same decisions I did. But for years, we didn't get that. For years, it was just an open question. Well, okay, in every episode you're mentioning that you've started a hydroponics garden, but that's a bare fraction of what you would need. And the novel that I read, that I want to talk about today, that I have been talking about for the last 20 hours, is The Escape. It's by Dean Wesley Smith and Christine Catherine Rush, who I think I've read this team before. It's a very early Voyager novel, as you can tell from the bun of steel. And it has all the hallmarks to me. It reads like it was this writing duo converting a rejected script of theirs for the show into a novel. It reads very much like that. It's very much something that could, at least at the beginning, be a weekly episode. And probably, if I'm right about that, if it was a pitched script, there are parts of it that seem to me to indicate that that is true. If I'm right about that, then I know why it got rejected, because it halfway through the book, the first half of the book addresses exactly the question that I'm talking about. Voyager is badly in need of supplies of all kinds, not just the kind you can replicate, but all kinds. They need a space dock. And of course, they don't know anyone in the Delta Quadrant. And Neelix, the morale officer and cook on board Voyager, is an inhabitant of the Delta Quadrant. And he has a great storyline at the beginning that the writers did not utilize to the full extent. They should have. Neelix is a scavenger. He is a freebooting trader and scam artist, basically. He's a good person. He's moral. He's not like Quark on Deep Space Nine. But he is a scavenger, bits and pieces, parts and whatnot. And Voyager finds him like that. And he negotiates with them and says, well, I would love to be on this vessel. He's stunned by the luxury, especially water. He said, I'd be happy to exchange my services as a guide for you in this part of the galaxy. And it would be great if we learn right away that Neelix doesn't know all that much about this part of the galaxy and that he's making it up. And maybe he has to come to terms with that. A bit of that storyline does come out later on in the first couple of seasons of Voyager, where Neelix starts to realize that the ship is slowly moving away from any part of the Delta Quadrant that he knows anything about. And that what good will he be to the ship? What good will he be to anybody? He's the last to know. He's the last to realize that by then he's part of the crew. He's part of the family, so there's no chance they're going to say, you're no use to us anymore. But at the beginning of this book, that is not true yet. The ship is still in an area of the Delta Quadrant that Neelix fairly knows well. And he tells them about a world, Alcawel, that is more derelict starships than you could imagine. Just an endless Oort cloud of derelict starships of all kinds that people often scavenge. That he is sure that Voyager can find anything that the ship is looking for there. Janeway and Chakotay, of course, are worried, we don't steal. And Neelix tells them, well, once you see this place, I doubt very much that you'll consider it stealing. It's more salvage than anything else. And the Janeway and her crew, Tuvok and Chakotay or whatnot, are naturally skeptical. Well, if this is true, then how isn't it picked clean? And Neelix says, everybody thinks this place is haunted. So people tend to give it a wide berth, but you don't think that. No, the Voyager doesn't need to worry. So they go, and the place that they encounter, I wish that this writing team had spent a little more time describing it. That's another one of my clues that this was originally just a script for the show, because you wouldn't spend a lot of time describing that if your special effects team is going to show it to your viewers. You wouldn't describe it a whole lot. And they don't, if that's true, they don't really make up the difference. I can just imagine. I imagined when I was reading it again, I think I read this when it first came out 20 years ago, but when I was reading it again last night, I was imagining what a really good modern day science fiction author could do in 2 pages describing that world. That doesn't happen here. It's fairly lifeless here, although the book is really good. The characters are right on the money. The interplay between them, no fat on the bone at all. It just keeps moving. And that's the first half of the book, which is completely natural. It addresses a natural question Voyager would need to put in for repairs. Voyager could not be completely self-sustaining. There's no way that could happen. You'd need dilithium, at least. You'd need raw materials. You lose a shuttle. You can't build a shuttle on your own in the ship. I don't think that the specs of Voyager actually allow for the creation of half the stuff that they need, of major items. So it is a pressing concern, and the first half of the book deals with that, and you kind of think that you're going to settle in and that you know what you're going to get for the rest of the book. For instance, you can guess that the plot line will be that, of course, these ships aren't salvage, and that there are people who want them, and that Voyager has walked into contest of ownership that's going to be sticky and maybe dangerous. But this writing team, about the halfway point, they throw the mother of all twists into this book. You just don't see it coming. I didn't anyway. I just didn't see it coming. And all of a sudden it opens up into a parallel dimension time travel story that would have been 100 times more expensive than Voyager in his second season could have done. So I understand, if this is a rejected script, I understand why it was rejected, but oh boy, does it make the rest of this book fun. Oh boy, does it ever. If I read this the first time, I completely forgot how good it is. It was tremendously enjoyable. Just a wonderful bubblegum Star Trek novel. So my Star Trek Voyager streak is continuing. The Escape is very, very good, nail biting right up until the end, in a way that a Star Trek novel really should be, even though you know how it ends. You don't know specifically how the novel The Escape ends, but you know perfectly well that how Voyager ends. So you know that it can't be nail biting in that way. The ship is not going to be destroyed. The crew is not going to die, and you know that ahead of time. These authors find a wonderful way around that. I won't give away too many spoilers here when I say, the crew's not going to die is not true in this book at all. It doesn't matter. These authors decide to have a lot of fun with it. And I had fun too. So my Voyager streak is continuing. I view this as the very least that I am owed after what I went through for Deep Space Nine, but we'll see if it continues. I'm just going to, tonight, when I'm doing tonight's reading, I will pick another Voyager novel from some other era of the show, and we will just keep plowing along. So I'm going to wrap this up for now, and I will see you soon. Thank you, BookTube.